You're listening to Offer Accepted, the show that is all about fostering careers in real estate and growing your real estate team. Your host is Vanessa Rosenblum. Vanessa is the president of a search firm called Pro R.E.A. Staffing, where they help real estate agents hire talented people so that they can grow their businesses. On this show, Vanessa interviews real estate industry professionals from real estate assistants to team leaders of mega teams to learn how they achieved their current level of success and what they're doing to rise to the next level in their career or business. Whether you are exploring a career in real estate or you currently run a large real estate team and you want to be better at recruiting, training, and managing your employees and agents, this is a show you'll want to follow, so don't forget to hit subscribe. All right, let's go to the show. Here's your host, Vanessa.
Hello and welcome. This is episode 6 of the podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa Rosenblum. Thanks for tuning in. My guest today is Michelle Choate, and Michelle reached out to me after listening to the very first episode of this podcast. That first episode was with Margaret Smith, and if you haven't heard it, you should definitely go back and listen to it. It's a great interview. But Michelle reached out to me because she's looking for a new role as a director of operations, and she wanted me to see her resume. And I knew within 2 minutes of talking to her that I wanted her on the podcast. And so I am really excited to dive more into her background with all of you listening so that we can all learn more about her. The things that really stood out to me when I talked to Michelle were, one, that she's worked both in commercial real estate as a director of operations and also in residential. And so I wanted her to get her perspective on what a day in the life is like for someone in this role in those two different environments, and kind of explore the pros and cons. And then she has a line on her resume that really stood out to me. She talks about how during her first 18 months on a job, this was 2 jobs ago, she helped her team double their revenue. This was a residential team. So first 18 months on the job, doubled the revenue of the team. Now, if you've ever listened to Gary Keller talk about real estate teams, or you've heard me talk, we know that if you make one good hire, you can double or even triple your business over the next 2 to 3 years. We say that, but I think a lot of people hear that and they just can't picture how that's possible, how one person can make that kind of a difference. So I want to dive into what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. What are some of the practical things that have to happen in order to achieve that kind of growth over 18 months or 2 years? So we'll get into that as well. So stay tuned. This is going to be an info-packed webinar. So hi, Michelle. Thanks for joining me today. Hi, good morning. Okay, so let's just start at the beginning. You studied flute and World War II history. How on earth did that translate into a career in real estate?
It really didn't in a lot of ways. I was waiting tables after I graduated college and realized I was a well-educated waitress and knew I'd always really had a passion for real estate. And I decided to take a jump and just dive in. And I was very, very lucky that I got an interview on a Tuesday and hired on a Wednesday.
So that first role, was that in commercial real estate or residential?
That was commercial. I did commercial first.
And what was your role when you started?
It was just an administrative assistant position. It was somebody to come in and answer correspondence and phone calls and do light marketing.
And so you were there for 6 years. How did your role evolve during that time?
A lot. I eventually started helping to separate out the different roles within the business. So that way everybody wasn't all doing the same things. We were able to time exclusively on our specific projects. So when I first came in, everybody was working on listings. So there's 3 assistants and marketing packages all look different and the way things were listed all look different. Nobody was in control of input into the different databases. And so there was a couple of times where the commission got input incorrectly. And as you know, that can be very detrimental because you can't change that after the fact once you're already in contract. So there were just some streamlining that really happened. And once we did that, the business started, we hit the downturn of the residential market and right around the same time that I joined that team. And we were able to keep the business going and increasing year over year because of paring down and really just focusing.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you said there were 3 admins. How many agents were on the team?
One.
Okay,
There was
one
one.
agent. Okay,
Mhm.
great. And so what kind of volume were you dealing with and what kinds of commercial properties?
So absolutely everything. There was business opportunities, leasing, investments, multifamily development, anything that is not a house, we did, unless it
Oh
was
wow.
commercially zoned, because we did a couple of those.
Oh
um,
wow.
so yeah, we really did anything and everything, and we were on average doing 60 to 100 transactions a year, doing 10 to 20 million dollars in volume of little teeny tiny things, because I don't think people realize, like, I just did a 3-year lease and it was a $33,000 transaction for 3 years.
Oh
That's the
wow.
volume of it. The commission's $975, right? But when you're doing enough of those to hit the $20 million mark, you know, so, and the way we looked at it is we were willing to work on anything big or small, because those would eventually turn into the bigger things, right? Helping somebody get their very first space for their business could turn in 10 years from now their very first investment into multifamily.
Right, exactly. So you started out as one of 3 assistants, and then at what point did you take on the role of director of operations?
It just kind of evolved and evolved into that. Kept taking on more and more responsibility until by the time that I left that position, um, it was pretty substantial, to try and find somebody else to step into that role.
So there are so many things to unpack with what you just said. So the
Yes.
first is talk about what are some of the systems and procedures you put in place so that when you left, somebody could step into that role?
So I would say the operations manual was pretty key. Writing down policies and procedures to how everything is supposed to go. Um, and I spent a lot of time trying to get that all written out and detailed out as best I could. It's always going to be hard for somebody to step into that role. And I think that's also another problem that I have seen come up a couple of times, is that agents find somebody that they work with perfectly, and then that person either leaves the business for some reason, has a family situation change or whatever, and then the agent then compares every person in the future to that one person. I actually saw that in play in this position, because I stayed in contact and tried my best for the last few years to try and help train somebody to go back into that position in the same way that I had. And I find that nobody's brain functions the exact same way as mine, just like mine doesn't function the exact same way as somebody else's. And so it's always hard, because you have to be open to, really looking at the different strengths of a person when you're trying to get them into a position.
I see that on both sides. So if an assistant has been in a role for 7 years or 10 years, very often when they leave that position, they will have a few job hops before they find their place again. And then same thing on the other side. If somebody's had an assistant for a long time, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to go through a few people before they find someone who, stays for the long term, like that last person. I think part of it is comparing someone to the other person, and two, we're not all a perfect fit for each other, and so you have to, like you said, you have to figure out how to find that fit again. So why did you finally decide it was time to leave? What made you move on?
Well, and this is going to be something that I'm going to be really honest about. It was a financial decision. I was undervalued and hadn't had a raise in over 5 years at my position, and I was being extremely underpaid. And I had a developer who came to me that I'd met through Coldwell Banker say, I'll double your salary, give you benefits so you could have health insurance for the first time in your life, and give you a 10% stake of my company.
Well, that was a no-brainer. Like
Yeah.
you don't say no to
And
that.
right. Who would say no to that? Right. I finally had an opportunity to do something different, and it was an absolutely amazing transition and scary at the same time. Um, so that 2 weeks scramble trying to finish up huge projects that I'd undertaken and digitizing files back into the 90s and that kind of thing. Like, I just wanted everything to be finished and perfect, and so somebody could seamlessly step in and transition in. And it's never going to be a perfect thing when somebody leaves your business, unfortunately. And that's why I, a year later, offered to come back and help train somebody for him to try and get somebody into the position that I'd been in. But yeah, so then I ended up going on to development and land acquisition to do something entirely different. The way my brain thinks, I'm a very high SC on the DISC scale. And so going into land acquisition zoning codes was my jam.
Like that sounds like my nightmare. That's like the worst thing I could ever do.
For days, man. It was amazing.
That is so funny. Oh my gosh. So what was your title, and what was the day and the life like in that position?
So I was a land acquisition specialist, and I was the licensed executive assistant. Day to day in that job, I was doing research on different properties. I was meeting with city officials to talk with our geotechs. I was organizing the geotechs and the surveyors. I was getting the wetlands people out. So over the time that I was with that company, I saw probably 100 homes from start to finish, plus helped acquire 30 more properties. And my reason for leaving that position was my boss at the time had decided to also do dirt work. And so he hired on contractors and bought excavators and everything and underbid everything and ran our company financially into the ground. So the one thing I can say for him is that he and I had such a great respect for each other that when the time came for him to tell me, but I knew because I was doing the books, he gave me 3 months to help him wind down the business and find something else. And so I was able to transition and really find where I wanted to go next because of having that extra time.
So then you went to your first residential real estate office, right?
I did. Yeah, I did. So I had decided that I was going to take my time and really find the right fit for me. And I sent out 20 resumes. I got 17 interviews and 16 job offers. And what I really want to stress more than anything, if there's an agent out there listening, that I did not pick the highest paid when I chose where I wanted to go next. I actually had somebody offer me double my highest offer if I would go to work for them. And I didn't take it. I chose somebody based on their vision and values and how we work together.
I have goosebumps. I just hope everybody hears that. Yes, that is so true. Thank you so much for talking about that. It's, the money is important. You shouldn't be undervalued. And at the same time, at the end of the day, it's not about the money. It's about the culture fit. It's about aligning with somebody who shares your mission and your vision and your values. And I can't tell you how often I talk to clients who are about to embark on this search and they're not clear about who they are or what they stand for or what their values are. They don't really own it. And it's really hard to find them a great fit because it's hard to talk about that position in a way that attracts talent, because talent isn't just looking for a paycheck. They're not just looking for the most amount of money. They want exactly what you said. They want to be aligned with somebody's values. So thank you for talking about that. So what were his values and what was his mission? And so why did that align with what you wanted to do?
Yeah. And before I say that, if there's anything I want somebody to take away from our conversation today, is that there are 2 things that hit me when I talk to different people in this industry, especially, my close relationship with Margaret Smith and knowing what I know in my own job searches and everything, is that you have to pay talent. That's number 1. If you want talent, you have to be willing to pay for talent. You can't pay somebody minimum wage and expect them to be somebody with 20 years of experience. Yeah. And number 2 is that you have to be on the same page with vision and values. And if those are not a fit, it will never be a fit, no matter how much money's on the table. So for me, when I met Troy, he had sat down with CEOs and of other companies and done workshops and put out a 9-point difference of what he wanted to present as his value statement to people.
And let me stop you. So was this his values to his clients, like as a sales thing, and for internal, or were there any different, messaging?
Different.
Okay.
So one of the things that's absolutely amazing, have you ever talked about or seen the Simon Sinek
Love him.
Start with Why?
I'm a super fan. So yes.
So, me too. One of the most amazing things that Margaret Smith brought to one of our operations retreat was Simon Sinek's executive assistant, Monique Hellstrom. If you go to Monique's website, which went live yesterday, I don't know when this is coming out, but
yeah.
How about this? Let's do it. If you go to Monique Hellstrom's website, which went live on April 17th, you'll see this mug on there because I sent her, after I met her, I sent her a note telling her how she changed my life. Because meeting her and hearing what she had to say gave me an entirely different take on being an admin and my value.
Wow. Okay, so you have to dig into that. So what was it about her message that resonated with you?
It was just how much we need to support each other, and it doesn't matter the visibility of our roles. It matters the viability we bring to the business. And she just is so powerful with her messaging. And she and I are very similar with our love languages in that we both like to make gifts for people. I'm sure you can see in the background here. That's actually all yarn.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness.
I make little, yeah. I'm not going to show the whole thing because I'm a little embarrassed of how much there is, but I make gifts for people. I make food for people, right? Like I do things, and that's my love language, is giving gifts and homemade gifts to make people feel loved. You know, why spend $30 on a blanket that you can buy at a store when I can spend $100 in 5 months of my time to hand make it for you, right? And she just, her words and how much she was willing to donate of herself and her time, you just felt wrapped in love while she was speaking. And she made sure that each and every one of us at that conference, there was 40 of us, had her phone number and knew that if we were having a rough day, that we could text her and that she would lift us up, because she believes that admin need to be there for each other because we need to decompress too. And for me, just hearing that from what I consider to be one of the highest levels of EAs was absolutely amazing to me. And she just really resonated with me. And also Simon Sinek's message really resonates with me. And so I actually got this amazing opportunity to do a why workshop with Elise Enriquez here in the Seattle area. She does a Start With Your Why workshop. And I got to put together my why statement over my time working with Troy. And that actually helped me really clarify why I'd always been in the admin role. And I know that's something that you and I wanted to talk about too, why, as I am a fully licensed agent, why am I in the admin world? And my why statement will tell you that. So my personal why statement, if I may share that with you, is please. I love to support people to help them find and express their passion.
Ooh,
that
I love
is
it.
what runs with me, right?
Yeah.
I want to be in support and service to other people so that they can discover and express their passion. And how that translates to me in my role and why I want to stay an admin and not be an agent. Like, in my opinion, there are dreamers and then there's reality makers. And you have to have both to create a business, right? You need to have the visionary who says, we need to do this. I want to see this outcome from my business. And in the same vein, you need to have the reality maker who says, okay, you want that to be your vision? Here's the process. Here's the procedure. Here's the steps. Here's the infrastructure. Here's the employees. Here's everything that you need in order to make that happen. I want to be the support. I want to be the reality maker.
So how did that translate into your dynamic with Troy? What was his vision and what were his values that aligned with yours?
Yeah. So his, if I can break down his huge 9-point statement and his vision and values, it is to be salt, make everything taste better.
And I love that. I've never heard that. Wait, be salt. That was on his list. Make everything taste better.
Really be the salt, make everything taste better.
Okay.
So the way that broke down is to make every person better off from when they met you. And how that translated was, like, I one time had a guy misdial our phone number and call me looking for a different business. So I, instead of saying, oops, wrong number, I was like, hold on just a second, sir. Looked up the information he was looking for, and I texted him the address of where he needed to go. Wow. It was that little kind of thing. Like, my boss wasn't going to come out and say, you're wasting your time. he came out and said, thank you for improving that person's life. Maybe when he goes to sell a house, he'll think about us now.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how that company value translated day to day. But it also led me to be that person who always wanted to go above and beyond for our clients, because it's my goal to never meet somebody's expectations. It's my goal to exceed them.
Let's talk about those first 90 days on that job. So you were connected to the way he operated his business. You wanted to improve people's lives just like he did. And so you knew you guys would be a good culture fit and a good value fit. And you knew that he wanted to dramatically increase his business. So that was your mission from day one. He wanted to double his business, right? All right. So take us through the first 90 days on the job. What did you do as you started that role to set you both up for that trajectory?
One of the most amazing things was I had access to his previous EA who had left the position 2 years earlier. And so I got to call her and say, tell me all your secrets, which didn't really happen. But, I got to have access to her to ask her questions if I needed, which was amazing. So that's one thing I can say is that if you leave a position, always being open to somebody reaching out to you is awesome. And then the next thing was just, I dove in head first. This is a funny story, but I worked with him side by side for a week, and then he took off for 2 weeks. He'd already had a vacation planned when he hired me on. And so for those 2 weeks, I got to dive into every single electronic file that he had, see the way that he did things, look through his operations manual that he had, and see how much was still applicable, because a lot of it was centered around REO business. And that was no longer the market when he and I were working together, and see what systems and procedures were there and how they needed to change.
You had kind of had that. It was almost a blessing in disguise, because you had this quiet time where there wasn't a whole bunch of craziness going on. You could just get settled and get set up, which is interesting because I've had this happen where somebody starts and then the boss has to leave. And it can either go one of two ways. Either the boss leaves and they feel like, great, I'm just paying somebody to sit in my office and they're not doing anything, or somebody takes charge. And I think it really depends on the personality of the admin, because you could have gone in there and been like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing around here. So what gave you the confidence? Was it your relationship that you already had built with him, or like what told you where you could dig and what you needed to do while he wasn't there to give you direction?
Yeah, I had access to him while he was gone. And I told him, like, I'm going to send you one email a day at the end of every day, so you know where I'm at. And so, I'm keeping up with your clients, but I'm also going to dig in. And so I completely reorganized the file system. I color coordinated everything. I created a system that worked for me. He had been essentially paperless, but for me, what works for me is having something tactile. And so I created a file for each transaction, even if there wasn't paper in it. It literally was a physical name, because that's what works for me, right? And you have to know what works for you in order to get your job done efficiently. And for me, that's having a tactile file, because what worked was grabbing my stack of files and setting it on my desk. And every day that I did contact with clients, make sure I was finished 100% with that file before putting it back. And I didn't go home until those were completely done. The thing that I think really allowed me the freedom to do that was the trust that I felt was already there from our time and talking. We had gone through the Keller Williams interview process. And there's actually one other thing I don't think I even told you about. We left Keller Williams a year and a half before I left the team. So I also not only got to do the Keller Williams systems, but I got to leave and experience what it's like to change brokerages with a team. So we can talk about that too.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about that. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, but we went through the Keller Williams hiring process, which their whole idea is hire slowly, fire quickly, right? And by my fourth interview with him, when I finally got the job offer, I was vested in the company. And the other companies that I'd done one interview with and had gotten the job offers, I don't think I was as vested. So I can say that hiring slow really works.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of KW admin who have been there for a long time. Actually, yeah, Danielle Glue. God, almost everyone I've interviewed so far has been with Keller Williams. Now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, I think there's a balance there. I think because sometimes talent just doesn't. They're not going to wait 8 interviews in to make a decision if they have other good offers. But I think taking the time to really understand what the candidate values and what's important to them and what their goals are and asking those questions makes a huge difference. Everyone I've talked to who has been through that process says, I felt like they cared about me and they cared about what I wanted to do with my life. And that was important to me because I wanted to make sure that my goals were aligned with my bosses, like you talked about earlier. So yeah, it can be a long and grueling process, but I think it's absolutely worth it for both sides.
So one of the great things about the KPA and what Keller Williams does present is all those different interview techniques and what to ask potential candidates. And it really helps you with finding the right talent that's the right fit for the role. And like I said, Troy actually wasn't the highest paying job that I was offered. He was actually, I think, 5th. But I took it because I believed in his vision and his values.
Okay, so he comes back from his 2-week vacation. You've color coded his filing system. You've set yourself up. So what happened next? What happened during your first 90 days?
What was amazing, and that's why this role succeeded for me and the next role I think failed for me, is that we set up clear expectations for what he wanted from me out of those first 90 days. And he gave me literally a checklist of items that I needed to learn within that first 90 days. And we worked side by side. We did once a week reviews. We did team meeting every Tuesday. And what ended up happening too, in that first 18 months, we went from a 3-person team to a 2-person team. It was literally me and Troy after the first 6 months. But we were still able to double his business with just he and I.
Wow.
So, and that's where it's a blessing in disguise to have a licensed assistant, because there were times where he needed an inspection done and he also needed to go do a listing appointment, and I have my license, so I can go do the inspection.
So I think you hit on some really, really key points. He had very clear expectations. You knew exactly what his goals were. He really provided you with guidance and feedback, and he was present enough to answer your questions and to walk you through those first 90 days. And I think, my gosh, I wish everyone would do that, because so many agents do the famous dump and run. They're like, great, you're here. You've done this before. See you later. And it's just not that simple. It is so important that you stay invested. The hiring process, it's sort of like, you know how they say the first 3 months after a baby is born is the 4th trimester. It's kind of like that with hiring. I mean, you spend all this time finding the right person. You get them to sign the offer letter. They start. But the process isn't over yet. I mean, you still have at least 90 days before that person is able to operate on their own. And really, I mean, even top assistants will tell you it takes 6 months, almost a year sometimes, to feel like you really have control.
I have my own theory on that too. So have you heard of the 10,000 hours theory? If you perform one task for 10,000 hours, you become an expert in your field, like expert witnesses. Think of a baseball player, right? One fastball pitch. If you're to do that 10,000 hours, well, let's think about how that breaks down. How many working hours are in a year? 2,080. Now let's take your 2-week vacation out. You got 2,000 hours a year. So it takes 5 years to become an expert in your position, right? I think it takes 18 months personally to operate with complete autonomy in a position. I think that first 18 months is the key time period where you can make or break a role. And if in that first 18 months you empower somebody to really be autonomous, if you can really give them trust to do what they need to do, and also be willing to be available and answer questions. I think that is also super, super important, because there's so many people that get offended when you ask them a clarifying question. And you can't have that kind of relationship because that'll breed contempt. You have to be open to, yes, I have done this one time for you before. you have done this 200 times before I got here. So I want to double check just one more time that I'm following your processes and procedures. And being able to trust yourself, but verify is so important. That first 18 months that Troy and I worked together, he did that. He had that empowerment and the gift of autonomy. I mean, I had my own office, that
Nice.
was phenomenal. So, but at the same time, he and I were able to work side by side, and it was great.
Talk about what are some of the things you did or that you guys did together to double the business? What systems changed? What marketing changed? What kind of prospecting changed? Go for it.
Yeah. One of the great things about Troy is that he never wanted to be stagnant. He always wanted to keep the business moving forward and growing. And as we have seen, as I've seen in my 13 years in the industry, marketing has changed from being able to post things on the MLS and Craigslist and then business comes to you, to now you have Facebook and Instagram and all different social medias. And now there's 20 different CRMs versus 3, and things are constantly changing and evolving and new systems. And he was always willing to jump in head first and try different approaches to the business to see what would work. Yeah, tried and true is great. Evolution is what's going to get you to the next step. So that first 18 months, we really stuck by the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule. Mm-hmm. And he had his 20% focus and I got the other 80%. And he had the trust in me to give me that other 80% and say, here's your list of projects. Now I need to walk away and I need you to come back to me with them being finished.
I love that. I actually have a graph that we've used for years that actually does exactly that. So, here's the agent's 20% of the work that happens in a real estate office. And guess what, assistant? The 80% that's left over is all you. And, you always get this look on new admin's face when you show them that, like, what? But that's the way it works. I mean, the agent should be focused on those top 20% activities and nothing else. And if you're an admin and your agent is reviewing marketing materials or going through transaction files or whatever else in the office, then either they don't trust you and you need to step up, or you need to push them back into their top 20% because they're avoiding their job, which happens.
Exactly. And we had a really good system too, where I could come in and say, hey, I see you sent the email that I was already working on. Could you tell me what I have done to not get your trust to be able to do that for you? Because I'd like to build that back up with you. And sometimes it was just oh shoot, I forget that you're there sometimes. And other times it was, oh, you're so busy. I was trying to be helpful. And it's like, oh, so how many prospecting calls did you not do? Well, you did that instead, right? And it's able to hold them accountable, having that trust to be able to hold each other accountable. It's why I like doing the 411s and the Keller Williams system are so important to me personally, and being able to be held accountable to my 411s.
I love that example of how you managed up and how you helped keep him focused on what he's supposed to do. An assistant I used to work with years and years ago in Los Angeles helped her boss go from, I want to say it was 500,000 a year GCI to $1 million in 1 year, because he was supposed to make a certain number of prospecting calls. And so she cleared out his office. She'd have the list for him. This was a long time ago. So this was like, here's a list on paper. She would close the door to his office, and he just wasn't allowed out until he made the calls. But once he could physically sign any transactions, any paperwork that needed to be done, and then he could go play golf all afternoon. And she just, if he was messing around, she would IM him. This was how old this story is. She would IM him and say, how many calls have you made? How many calls have you made? And that's it. It was just, you need to show up and make your calls, sign documents, and leave. And they doubled their business that year.
Exactly.
Right? It's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, and like I said, with Troy and I, during that 18 months where that first amount of business doubled, it went from 2 agents and an admin to 1 agent and an admin, and still being on that same trajectory, which was absolutely phenomenal to be able to be a part of. And one other thing I can say that I really respected about Troy is that he had a coach. He had a business coach who valued me as much as he valued Troy, and always called, because he always called into the office for their weekly call and talked to me for the first 10 minutes. Nice. And then there were times where I would be out of the office, and so I would get the coaching call instead. Mm-hmm. And, being held accountable to the business coach was amazing. And also having somebody in my corner too, who's like, hey, I know he's going to tell me all these things. What did you see last week? Mm-hmm. What do I need to hold him accountable to? Mm-hmm. And so I always slip in a couple of extra. I think he needs to do a few more client face-to-faces, because I prepped all of his materials to do that, and he didn't go do those last week. So
you get a little tattletale to the coach. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, look, I think every salesperson, every business person needs to have a coach. And I can tell you for a fact, my clients who have coaches have better, longer lasting relationships with their admins, because they know what they're supposed to be doing. They know what their admin's supposed to be doing. They have somebody to to bounce issues off of. Oh, my assistant did this. Is that weird? Like, how am I supposed to feel about that? Well, they have a professional who can say, that's not weird. This is how you should have dealt with that situation. Or, yes, that's weird. This is how you talk about it to your admin. So yes, having a coach, I think, is essential. So at what point did you guys change companies?
So about 2.5 years into me working with Troy, we decided to switch away from Keller Williams to go to a different brokerage called Sterling Johnston. We made the decision to switch to a different brokerage because they were based around entrepreneurial teams who were looking to build. And so we switched over because they allowed us to have a full DBA and go away from using another company's name on all of our logos and branding. And it's always a transition. And I was in charge of all the onboarding and changing over all the systems and learning all the new transaction management items. And it was a lot of work, and it was definitely worth it. And then one cool thing that I was also able to do was talk with their team, their management team and their upper echelon of owners. They had never had support for admin before. So they didn't have a culture of helping admin to network. They had all sorts of masterminds for agents. They didn't have that same network for admin. And so I got to help them create that and open up the opportunities and present and teach classes and all sorts of other things too. So it opened up a whole new opportunity to talk about the admin world with a brand new brokerage and help them to start seeing the value in their own admin and for teams that want to bring on admin. So that transition was definitely a challenge and a growth opportunity.
Very interesting. And in terms of dealing with the systems, just like the organizational change that had to happen when you changed brokerages, talk about what that was like and getting everybody up on the new systems. And
yeah, so I went and did all of the trainings and learned everything and worked out all the bugs and the kinks. And then I sat down with my mega and the other team members, and there was, like I said, 5 of us. So I got to break down the 2 weeks of training that I did into 30-minute sessions and chunks. But because a lot of that was all on me, because I did all transaction management and all listing management and everything, it was up to me to write out the policies and procedures and the operations manual for how that stuff went. So
perfect. Okay. One thing I wanted to fit in somewhere in this interview was I wanted to talk about your hours. So when you worked for Troy, how much overtime did you do? How often were you available or working on weekends?
So one of the great things that I did with Troy was we did the Perfect Real Estate Assistant course with Monica Reynolds. And one of the things she says is you teach people how to treat you. And her firm belief is that, well, real estate agents have sometimes crazy hours, that it's also really important to set hours that you will and will not work inside of and outside of. So like as a team collectively, no one on our team worked after 7 p.m. That was hard, fast rule. And no one on our team worked Sundays. That was a hard and fast rule.
Wait,
and
in
we all
residential real estate, nobody worked on Sunday? No open
correct.
houses? How did,
Sometimes buyer's agents on our teams, if they didn't have enough clients, they would volunteer to do it. But it was hard and fast that the admin, that the mega would absolutely not. And I mean, there's times where like we did 4th of July parades, or we did volunteer stuff within the community. That would be weekend stuff. But we wanted all of our agents to make sure that they knew that they had downtime, because it's important because you can do twilight open houses. You can do happy hour open houses. You don't have to do them on a Sunday. And like I said, we did have our agents volunteer to do them. If they wanted to work those hours, I wasn't going to stop them. But I also, if they worked both Saturday and Sunday doing opens, I made them take a weekday off. There's one day where you will not be coming into the office because I will not have you be burned out. And that was really, really important to everyone. And everybody has always been super respectful of my time outside of my office hours. I tell them, I'm like, I will be in the office 8 to 4:30 or 8 to 5, whatever that is that we set up together. And outside of those hours, unless it was an emergency, they really did not ever contact me. And I volunteered many times, to stay in the office. And like recently I was working on a project and all of a sudden I looked up and it was dark outside. It's like, oh, it's 8 o'clock at night. I should probably go home. But when you love what you do, sometimes those things don't matter. And when you're on a salary, there's the opportunity for agents to take advantage of you. And there's also the opportunity for agents to show you respect and love. And I've seen both. And what I've had, luckily, was respect, which was, you're not going to need to punch a time clock. You don't need to call me when you get into the office every morning. I respect you enough to know that you're an adult. You say you'll be there by 8. I trust you. And for me, I usually got there at 7, got my cup of tea in the morning, answered emails, had time prepping for my day. And then I was ready for everybody by 8 o'clock. So I could really start my day at that time period. And because there was that respect, nobody ever, expected me to be there before then. And when I was, they said, thank you. And they appreciated me. And they really respected my weekends. I also have a nonprofit because I do music and other things. And I was always lucky to have the support with that. So.
Yeah, well, and I talk to so many agents who feel like they have to answer their phone for their clients 24/7, and therefore their assistant has to be available 24/7 because sometimes they can't answer their phone. But I do know other teams who set boundaries with their clients. And I don't care what market you're in. They're in every market. You will find agents who say, I don't answer my phone after 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah. And one of the things I've also heard is if you don't define what you want, somebody else will define it for you. Yeah. So with us telling clients up front, like when I send a welcome email, I say, I am available to you from this hour to this hour, these days. And clients that tried to contact me outside of those hours would get a bounce back from me that said, thank you so much for your message. I will be back in the office at this time. And we were lucky, like we shared a phone. It was a VoIP line. So all texts and calls went to both of us on our cell phones. And so I could see every text message that was being sent. I could see everything that was happening with the business. And I also set the hours for that. And they got a bounce back or were sent to voicemail outside of those hours and said, like, if it's after 7 o'clock or on a Sunday, expect a call back the next business day. And it was great having that because we taught our clients that we put our families and our values first too. Yeah. And, that we will make sure that we can take care of your needs within the hours that we actually work.
Can you think of any examples when a client was upset that you were not able to help them outside of business hours, or did they all just sort of go with the flow?
I've had agents be upset about my business hours because they called to ask a question about the house. So say I brought a listing online on a Thursday and said offer review dates Tuesday. I had an agent call me on a Monday night at 9 o'clock at night to ask a question about the listing. And I called back and they called 5 or 6 times and left voicemails and angry texts and everything. And I chose not to respond. And I called back the next morning and answered all of their questions. And they're like, well, why didn't you return my call last night? And I said, well, as the voicemail said to you, after 7 o'clock, we don't respond to messages. Well, real estate's a 24/7 business. And they were angry with me. And I said, I am very sorry that you run your business that way. That's not how we choose to run ours. We choose to respect our families and our personal time. And the agent like backed down and was like, oh, you do that? Yeah, it's possible. And I've had clients that, with clients, I sometimes would allow a little more leeway and I would text back or whatever, because I always want to make sure that they're happy. Mm-hmm. But I also made sure to let them know, like, hey, I wanted to let you know I got your message and I'll be handling it first thing tomorrow morning. That's most of the time was my response to them. Having that autonomy to be able to set up for respect breeds integrity and breeds excellence, I think, and allows you to be of the best service. If you're on 24/7 and you have no downtime, you can't be your best self all the time.
Well, no. And for admins who are put in that situation, I'll tell you, they will find another job where they're given downtime because they didn't sign up to work. Because, by the time they calculate their hourly rate, if they're available nights and weekends, 7 days a week, they're looking at their, $10 an hour effective rate. And they're saying this is absolutely not worth it. So you do have to, if you're going to run your business as a 24/7 business as an agent, you have to build in safeguards so that you don't expect your admin staff to do the same because they just won't stay with you long term. Period.
Absolutely. And what I would love to say to agents out there is you don't have to be a 24/7 agent. You will still, by teaching clients that time is valuable. And that's a lot of the times, like what I would say to clients is like, I respect your time so much that I'm going to reduce the number of hours that I'm going to contact you because I don't want you to have to be available for me that often because I respect your family time. And if I turn it around and phrase it in some way where it's about them, then I always found that they respected the same thing when I put down that boundary too. And like I said, it's all about setting expectations, right? This takes us back to that expectations question. When I sent the introduction email, like, hi, my name is Michelle. I'll be the listing manager from this moment all the way through closing and beyond. You'll hear from me for client events too. So these are the hours that I will be in contact with you. If these hours do not work, I'm willing to flex. Let's talk about that. But I never had a client who said, okay, well, I can only talk, most of the time they'd be like, oh, I can only talk to you on my lunch hour from 12 to 1. I'm like, I'll always email you the night before then and make sure you're prepped to talk to me the day, And I always had clients willing to work with me.
And then how'd things go from there?
So we, throughout the time, brought on other people to the team, and we had agents come and go. Some didn't work out. And then by the time I left, there was 5 of us. So, and the reason that I think I should talk about the reason that I ended up leaving the business, and it was I got laid off. So we were super busy, and our stuff was going on and on and on and on. And I'd brought on an assistant, and she was about half my wage. And then all of a sudden, we saw the real estate market turning, and Troy had been working with a couple different business coaches to revamp his business and start being able to have more money to invest in different areas. And my position did not make financial sense anymore. And so the decision for us to part ways was a financial one and a business savvy one. And I completely understood. There was no hard feelings there. It was entirely a business decision. And I respect him for being able to come to me and talk to me about it and sit down and have, a full on conversation of what was going on. And, it's helped his business really thrive to be able to revamp the structure of what he needed out of admin financially.
Yeah. And that must have been a hard conversation on both sides.
there were tears,
Yeah.
you know, and like I said, we're still good friends, and I respect him very, very much for all the opportunities that he gave me. And like I said, I sent him 3 referrals last week, and I haven't worked for him for 8 months now.
So when you left, what did you want to do next? This was an opportunity for you to take on your next adventure. What was your vision for that next role?
I wanted to join a team that was ready to do the same thing that I had done with Troy, that was ready to be held accountable, have somebody who could come in and revamp their systems, provide processes and procedures, and really go to the next step and do the work that was necessary to get where they wanted to go. And so I was unemployed for 33 hours. I
Wow.
I met with 4 different agents that I'd worked with. All 4 gave me different job offers, and I selected one to go with 33 hours after Troy and I had the conversation about me leaving. And so good and bad, right? Like, it made me feel good that I was in demand. And the bad part is I didn't go through that long interview process, and I went off what people said, not their actions. And I think that's why I ended up with a team that wasn't the right fit.
Yeah.
So
So let's talk about the interview process. So for candidates who are maybe interviewing with people who are moving pretty fast, they want you and they're, ready to move forward. What sort of questions do you think you should have asked in hindsight? What would have helped you make a better decision about this team that you were evaluating?
yeah, and I actually have a list of employer interview questions that I take with me now.
Oh, I
That
should have that. Will you send that to me after this call? I would love to have that.
I
Okay.
absolutely will. And I can read a couple of them
Yeah.
to you. So let me pull those up while we're talking here. I keep them in my phone since I have that at all interviews. But what does a typical day look like for an assistant that you imagine? What are some immediate projects that you see that need to be addressed? What skills and experiences are you looking for? And then other things like, how will I be trained? Are there opportunities for advancement and professional development? What are some of the other ones? What are the most important things you'd like to see someone accomplish in their first 30, 60, and 90 days on a job? What are performance expectations in the position in the first 12 months? What is the performance review process? How often will I be formally reviewed? Things like that. I wish I would have asked those questions, because I think, and one of the things that you touched on earlier is people who are like, dump and run. And unfortunately that happened because they're like, oh, you've done this position for so long, you know what to do. I know the position. I don't know your business. So one of the important things that I should have asked was, what are your expectations of me for the first 90 days? Because I clearly failed to meet their expectations, but I never knew what their expectations were.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really, really unfortunate. So I'll touch kind of briefly on that position that I was at for 6 months. I came on board a husband and wife team, which is already an interesting dynamic. The wife was the team lead. She'd been in the business 20 plus years. The husband had joined the business and had 2.5 years of experience. Mm-hmm. And then they hired me on, somebody with 13 years of experience, to help take their business to that next level and help them to grow. And we didn't do the long interview process, unfortunately. They were really good friends. And I thought it would be a great fit because we liked each other personally. And I didn't get the chance to talk about the vision and the values. And I wish I had. I wish hindsight 2020, mm-hmm. I wish I asked about the metrics and stuff, because I'd had that in my previous positions and I didn't get that here. And accountability is huge for me. And I was told that I'd have complete autonomy and that I'd be able to hold everybody accountable. But when it came time to hold people accountable, nobody wanted it. And that's hard, right? When you're told to create systems and procedures, and then they decide which ones they want to follow and which ones they don't. And so there comes a point where it's just like, is this really the right fit? And so after the end of 6 months, we decided to sit down and, I'd been asking for weekly reviews. I'd been asking for a list of expectations. I did get one list of expectations, and I accomplished all of those items. But apparently there was more that needed to be put on that list, and it just didn't become the right fit. And so we sat down and said, this isn't working. And I was hired on to help them go to the 100 plus transactions a year, but you can't just hire somebody and have that happen. You have to put in the work too. Mm-hmm. So as an agent, as a mega, if you're ready to go to the next step, you have to do the work to get there. It doesn't just fall in your lap.
Yeah, I think it's important for hiring managers, for real estate agents, to be really honest about what they want. People say they want someone like you. They want someone who's going to come in and tell them what to do and whip their business into shape. But that may not really be what you want, because if they do that, they're going to expect certain things of you. Like you just said, they're going to expect that you're going to make your calls, follow the system, show up to meetings, pay attention, give feedback. There's a whole laundry list of new roles and responsibilities that come when you hire an employee. You are now a manager. You are now a boss. You don't get to keep your same job description. You're now accountable to somebody, and they're accountable to you. And so I think if you could just sit down and be really honest, do you want to be a boss? Do you want to put in the work that's necessary to get your business to the next level with the help of this person? If so, great. Well, then you got to show up. And
right.
And I just see so many relationships implode early on because of these missed expectations, misalignment of values, misalignment of goals. So these are the things that we always talk about. I have a class called Find Your Fit, and it's all about that. If somebody isn't a goal fit, a culture fit, and like a job fit, obviously they have to have the skills for the job, and they have to be talent. So that's sort of like this overarching necessity, right? You have to be smart, talented, motivated. Then it's just not going to work. And you have to slow down on both sides. So I'm really so happy to see that you have a list of questions that you ask. I noticed that you didn't have any questions about values or vision. Is that also in the list? Farther down?
I only got the first 20. There's 71 questions that I take with me. I don't ask all of them, obviously, because a lot of those get covered in the interview.
Yeah.
But I like to have them with me to be able to reference from while I'm having the conversation with somebody. So, and that's the thing is, when I got hired onto this position, we both jumped in too quickly, right? That was the, I think the main issue is they hadn't been necessarily thinking about hiring somebody. I just all of a sudden came available, and they knew they needed somebody, and there wasn't this time to think about the changes that needed to happen. And I think that, and I really hope that over the next 12 months, they revamp their systems and procedures and come back and hire somebody, because I think that they need it. I just think they weren't ready. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. There's no hard feelings on my end at all. It just was not a fit. Mm-hmm. And, it's scary to be unemployed. Sure. It's scarier to be in a position that doesn't work. It was a real blessing for me to work in a position that wasn't the right fit, because I can see now how I also need to be choosy and not just take something because I want it to work, but to take something because it's in line with my vision and values. I think that is the most important thing for me, was I didn't make sure that those were 100% in alignment.
Mm-hmm. So what are you looking for now? What is the next opportunity for you?
So I am really open. I'm looking at a couple of different industries even. I think my skills in real estate transition really well into law. And so I've looked at a couple of different law firms that work with real estate companies because there's so much crossover with contracts and that kind of language and attention to detail and all those other things. So I'm looking for my next right fit. I don't think I'll ever get away from the real estate industry just because I love it so much. And I love that being of service to clients and what the industry has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm out there now looking. So anybody listening,
yeah, no, exactly. So if you want to reach Michelle to find out about interviewing her for a job, you can reach out to me at Pro R.E.A. Staffing. Just go to proreastaffing.com. And if you're looking for jobs in real estate, make sure to check out our career page. So proreastaffing.com/careers. And, don't be a stranger. That's how I met Michelle, right? So
yeah,
we're always
absolutely.
looking for talent.
Yeah. And I'm excited because I know one of the things that going through somebody like you is making sure that interview process is done properly and that the people are the right fit and it's the right time to hire somebody, because I know that you don't take on clients if they're not willing to do what's necessary to keep talent either. So, I really, really appreciate people like you and services like you. Yeah, it's great to go and find your own team to work for, but then you can also end up in the situations like I did where it just wasn't the right fit because we didn't go through the right steps. Yeah. And it's always great to have somebody on the outside to say, well, I've met you both and looking at your personality types, I know you both want this to work. Here's what I see. Yeah. So
there's definitely a matchmaker quality to this job. Absolutely. One of the things that we do as well is we have a sister company where we coach and train admins and their agent through their first 90 days on the job, because we know how important it is. You can't just drop people on the first day that they start work. You have to follow them through those first 90 days, at least the first 90 days. So we do that as well. And I think we've definitely had top talent say, I chose this job because I know I'm going to get the training and support that I need during that initial time period. So wonderful. Well, it was so great to dive into your story and learn more about you. Thank you so much. And let's find Michelle a job, y'all.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on and for talking with me. And I really, really hope that you're able to help me find my next right fit. So
perfect. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks for listening to Offer Accepted, the podcast for fostering careers in real estate and growing a successful real estate team. If you like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. You can also check us out on YouTube. Search Pro R.E.A. Staffing and you'll find this and a ton more content all around hiring and managing your growing real estate team and launching your career in real estate. We'll see you in the next episode.